All right. What's up? What's up? What's up? Bit of some technical difficulties. Dude, we're 1-0. American football season, NFL started this morning in Sydney, Australia. And unfortunately for myself, my childhood, my friends and family, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, and I'm a Browns fan. And I got to admit, being a Cleveland, I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, the former Indians, which are the Guardians, and the Cavs, and then Ohio State football. So I'm a loyalist. You don't meet a lot of Cleveland Browns fans, considering we've never won a Super Bowl and we haven't won a championship, I think, since 1958, the Jim Brown and Otto Graham days. Now, that might have trickled down in the 60s. My years are off. It's been too long. Since I was a kid, since I was born, we've never won anything. But we're 1-0 today, and we beat the Bengals, an in-state rival, 24-3. The defense played lights out. Myles Garrett is a beast. Deshaun Watson, fingers crossed, will come into his own, and we'll see the Deshaun Watson from yesteryear when he was with the Texans. And Nick Chubb, what could you say? You can't say enough about Nick Chubb. In my opinion, he's been the best running back in the league the last handful of years. Hopefully we could get a title. And I'm coming off watching that. Also doing some upkeep on the boxing scene today. Did you guys see what Danny Garcia said? I want to start there. Danny Garcia, a former world champion, former opponent of Errol Spence Jr., gave an interview today, and he was talking about how EJ looked against Crawford and then his opinion on what to expect in the rematch. Are we just all making excuses, guys? Like, is Errol Spence Jr. just that likable that for him to lose like that, it's not necessarily Bud was just great, but EJ, there had to be something off? Or could it just be as simply that if styles make fights, Errol Spence Jr. fights Bud Crawford 10 times, can we honestly say he would lose 10 times? And Danny Garcia said no. Garcia gave his opinion on the things that went wrong. I think he even used the word accumulation. It was an accumulation of, obviously, the well-documented car crashes, the life adversity he's been through, the resume he's been through. I guess EJ is notoriously for aggressive fight camps and sparring. And then he talks about the weight cut and the weight gain. I'm going to do a video on that soon, but I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, is going from 190 to 147 is a feat. 190 is a walking weight of Errol. And then going from 190 to 154, we've spoken about this ad nauseum. And I guess until we get a date, or even once we do get a date, we're going to continue to speak about the things that went wrong. Would things or will things go different in a rematch? It's just we just got to get used to these talking points. I've been playing it both ways. I could see how Bud will beat EJ every time, and it's easy to also see how Errol could win in a rematch. Now, when you I was looking at Errol's resume, and it's easy for us to forget because boxing is such a sport of what have you done for me lately? The haters and the trolls will only talk about EJ as a bum because he lost his last fight. But the people who know the sport will look at Errol's resume. And something that I kind of overlooked going into the first fight was the fact that when Errol beat Carlos Ocampo on June 16th, 2018, June 16th, 2018. 5 years ago, he defeated Ocampo via first-round knockout. Since that fight, 5 years, he fought Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, and Ugas. And those 4 fights, the Mikey Garcia fight went all 12 rounds. The Sean Porter fight went all 12 rounds. The Danny Garcia fight went all 12 rounds. That's 36 rounds. The Ugas fight went 10. That's 46 rounds. So I guess what I wasn't talking about it enough in the lead-up was the fact that it's not like Errol was going in there and starching people. He was, the Sean Porter fight split decision. Mikey was unanimous. He finished Ugas in the 10th. Danny was unanimous. And it's almost like, and then you go back a couple fights before the Lamont fight. The Kell Brook knockout was a war. That went 11 rounds. So when Danny Garcia today was talking about accumulation, I think there's something to that, and that's an adjective that I hadn't used yet going into that fight, the first one with Terrence, and I hadn't seen anybody else really use the word accumulation theory for something that would be maybe on the back of Errol's mind going into that fight. He has a lot. He's been in some wars, and it's funny that we didn't talk about that because that the media chose to talk about the opposite because Terrence hadn't been in wars, that Crawford's resume must be weaker. And I think that is the lie that we all played on ourselves, was the fact that, and we wouldn't have known this until it played out, but we told ourselves that because Crawford hadn't been in wars and he was finishing fighters quickly, that Crawford's resume was weaker than Errol's. Now, that may be the case on paper. Look, do the stats. A lot of this is held up to conjecture. But why weren't we saying that Errol has a lot of miles on him? Why weren't we saying that Errol has been in some wars? Why weren't we saying that Errol can't finish? Did anyone say that? I mean, think about it. You hear this. That's the knock on a lot of guys when they're coming up. Oh, he's good, but he's not a finisher. I mean, if boxing's a sport of what have you done for me lately, and you go from the Mikey, Sean, Danny, Errol only finished 1 out of his last 4 fights, and that fight took him 10 rounds to finish. Now, no one spoke about that. I think that's interesting. I think that's important. Looking at this resume, so he also talked about, Garcia mentioned the Chris Algieri fight and the Lamont Peterson fights, and he referenced these. I know he fought Chris in 2016, and he fought Lamont, and I think in 2018. Yeah, and one was a 5th round finish, one was a 7th round finish. But Garcia takes it all the way back to 2016 when referencing that he feels that Errol Spence Jr. was the best version of himself. And he says that even the one that he fought wasn't the same guy that fought Algieri and wasn't the same guy that fought Lamont. It's interesting. We won't know. We'll know all these answers once the rematch happens. And that's the beautiful part about boxing, because this rematch, when it goes down, Errol has an opportunity. Even if Errol loses again, he still has an opportunity to prove his naysayers wrong. I think Errol comes out looking more energized, more filled out. Even if he loses, I think in the eye of the public's perception, I think he could still win. This is something I was talking with my buddy about this weekend. I don't think Errol Spence needs to beat Crawford in the rematch to still win, if that makes sense. Now, if he comes out flat again, I will 100% be on the side of then saying, okay, maybe EJ should look at wrapping it up on a career. But if EJ comes out and just looks vital, because that's a word that I would use, that he was lacking. He was lacking vitality. He was lacking somebody that looked like they were ready to go hunt. He looked like a bloke that I just ran a 20K with, and he hadn't run a 20K in ever, and he's just done. He's laying on the couch now. He didn't look, because guys who are fit could run a 20K and do something else. I use that. It's a pretty shitty metaphor, but yeah, EJ didn't look vital going into that, and it was the whole fight week ad nauseum. We've spoken about this. I think there might be something to the resume over the last 5 years. He has been inactive. I mean, the Ugas fight was 2023, and then he fought Danny in 2020. So if you go from Danny in 2020 to Bud 3 years, it's only 2 fights. You know what I'm saying? So there is a such thing as being in that boxing shape, having some people believe in ring rust, some don't. I think there's something to that. But the hard fights were hard fights. He didn't finish. Being able to not finish a guy and then get those accumulative rounds, it's something that nobody talked about. I mean, I just want to bring that up. I didn't hear anybody talk about that. We only heard people talking about that his resume's weak because he was starching everybody. But I think it's fair to say, no, Bud's a finisher, and Errol was having trouble finishing his opponents. And there could be something to that. What do you guys think? Unpopular boxing opinions. Here's something I wanted to ask you. Give me a second. If you guys go back to I put up in our boxing news today forum on our Facebook group, guys, I put up a picture of Jeff Horn versus Manny, And I remember watching that fight live here in Sydney. It was up in, I think it was up in Brisbane, that fight. And obviously Horn won, and the media went crazy. Pacquiao lost to a school teacher, blah, blah, blah. But I watched that fight, and everybody claimed that it was a robbery and that Pacquiao really won. And I've always stood by this, and I'm not trolling. I know some people on the comments on the boxing page will say fake news. 100%, if we're scoring it by rounds, Jeff Horn won that fight. He won more rounds than Manny. I always understood why people thought Manny won, and let me explain why. What Manny did to Horn in the 9th round, I think it was that I didn't replay it. I've only watched this fight once, and my memory could be wrong. But what Manny did to Horn in the 9th round, and I think maybe a little bit of flashes in the 10th and 11th, he had these short little flashes and moments of greatness. There were these flashes where Manny, in those later rounds, we saw Manny in his prime. Now, what happens with a fighter as he gets older, he has less and less moments of that. When you're younger, you could fight a whole fight in your prime. You could look flashy and amazing. Everything that you do at the highest level, you can maintain that through a long fight. As you get older, we start seeing that time within the fight get shorter and shorter of the flashes. And then throughout a longer career, you only see it every now and then. But when Manny looked great in that Horn fight in the 9th, and I think it was the 11th, his greatness was so much bigger than what Horn's skill was, that I think that's why people thought Manny won. Because there were flurries, there's things that Manny, obviously, he does that Jeff Horn could only dream of doing. But in terms of scoring the fight, who won rounds, Horn had won. I think I had Horn winning 9 out of 12 rounds. But when he almost got finished in the 9th and looked very amateur, and Manny had this flash of greatness, you saw the separation of when a guy like a prime Manny gets a Horn out of there in the first 3-4 rounds. That's not what we're saying here. But I'm saying why I think people cried robbery, because the difference, the separation of skill set was so far apart. But that doesn't mean that you win the fight. There's a scoring system for a reason. There's 12 rounds for a reason. It's a 10 must scoring system, meaning that if you win a round, you have to get 10 points. You guys would be shocked unless you get a point deducted. There are scenarios where you could get a point deducted, still win a round. Maybe you drop the guy, you get a point deducted, 9-8. But no, I think a 10 must. I'd have to refresh my knowledge. But anyway, because I'm digging myself hole, because the difference between the Pacquiao and those moments versus the steadiness of just what Jeff Horn looked like, I think that's why people called robbery. And that's my unpopular boxing opinion of the day. Jeff Horn, it was not a robbery. He 100% defeated Manny Pacquiao. Let me know what your guys is. What's your? This is a segment I like doing. Unpopular boxing opinion of the day, because there's a lot of them. Something that you would say around your friends to where you say it and they go, the Kermit the Frog thing. But I'm working on a video right now, guys, of the Danny Garcia. I'm editing his interview. I'm going to put it up on the video segment of the page. Guys, the way this algorithm works, Spence ran into someone that wasn't intimidated by him. Bud is a dog. Bud team, 100%. Oh, RMR123, you're spot on with that. The game planning, we did a live a couple days ago, and we talked about the brilliance of Bomac with that game plan, and also it's the importance of strategy. It's very important to have a well thought out game plan each time you fight. You know what I mean? And that was the thing that got exposed with EJ, is that when you look at his career resume, it's the same game plan. And that's easy to plan for. But I'm doing a video right now, editing on the video side of things with this Danny Garcia interview. And guys, the way the algorithm works is if you guys just like the video, it gets suggested more and more. And anything you want, all things boxing, let me know. I appreciate the support. I'm only, I think, of doing just boxing content 3 months in. So I plan on growing this with you guys. And I appreciate all the support, man. It's been cool. Stay tuned.